I'm sure that with the benefit of hindsight, you will see that it's also part of the most bizarre experiences in your life that are co-shaping the leadership and how you're showing up in the world. And this is something that I wanted to discuss with you today mostly. How do we find ourselves as leaders, and how do we create our career paths? Because obviously this is a virtual job fair, and I don't have any job to offer you, but I have two kinds of jobs or types of work that I would like you to consider as we go through this conversation. Some of you were so amazing and have already started reaching out to me on all kinds of social media this week and last week. So I have some anecdotal questions that I've collected from some of you. And some of you that I've had the chance to exchange with seem a bit frustrated about the position that you're in, given obviously the whole madness that's happening around us. And you may not have benefited from the internships as much as you could have because you haven't had a chance to do the networking and the outreach to the labor market this past couple of months as you would have under normal circumstances. So what I wanted, the number one message that I wanted to pass to you is not to get frustrated and try to get out of that sometimes victimizing role, because obviously it's hard, but I think it's very important that we learn how to stay, I don't want to use the buzzword of resilient, but the fact that even with Flavia, we were discussing how some of you might feel as you are the crisis generation going from one macro or geopolitical problem to another. And I think a big career management feature or skill that we all have to learn through these experiences is getting out of that identity of an employee and going to job fairs, going to job hunting sites, trying to figure out how to sell yourself in that HR negotiations game, and swap that with who are you trying to be? How are you trying to show up in the society, in the economy? What is the job that you would like to create for yourself? Because that is a much more empowering place to be. And so a couple of questions that I would like you to start considering, pondering over, maybe that's the first job that I can give you for a couple of months ahead for summer, is the questions around like how do you want to show up for the world? What is the greater purpose or things that you care about? What is the passions most closest to your heart? What are the strengths that you are really proud of, not in a sense of those HR and job interview negotiations, but where is it that you're like really feeling in flow at your best, where you're loving what you're doing? Is it this kind of organization of events, or is it writing policy papers? And then which are the values that you would like to see underpinning the career that you're living and the jobs that you're having, so that you know where are the boundaries that you're not willing to compromise on. This is going to make your life much easier on the labor market when you're going to be trying to either cherry pick or try to see what are the opportunities out there as the economy gets going, hopefully after summer a bit more, and probably being lost and not being able to choose. And so before you start thinking, what is this spiritual bullshit that she's going on about? This is something that I would have been very grateful for if somebody had told me a couple of years ago, because it's the inner work and inner exploration that I've started with probably a bit later, that maybe some of you have already started, or that some of you can start thinking about what is the kind of ideal job and the role that you would like to play from kind of a broader perspective. And so maybe keeping this in mind, I can now tell you a bit more about my own story, which is, so you've heard that the end of it is that I'm a policymaker now at DG Grow. I'm a policy assistant of one of the directors there, working on all kinds of competitiveness, industrial policy issues, Brexit also the past 3 years, which we'll get to probably, about how frustrating experience that was from my personal perspective. But other than that, I'm doing all kinds of other projects that we can also discuss. So you've probably, I don't know if you've seen that in my profile, in the program. I'm Slovak, I'm a normal girl born in Czechoslovakia, where I grew up. I studied international relations. I was doing all kinds of, I'm also probably, as you, part of that internship generation, doing years and years of internships for free and trying to get my hands dirty with everything that I felt called to doing. So I was doing Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Embassy in London, Erasmus Plus. I had my first job was in strategy consulting, advising Western European companies with their expansion to Central European markets. So that was a beautiful, beautiful job experience that gave me that consulting chip in my head, because I had a chance. It wasn't like one of the biggest, it was more of a boutique kind of little consulting where I had a chance to work really from the pre-sales and desktop research all the way to the final presentations to the clients. And so that I feel is a very valuable experience to have at the beginning of a career, to get yourself kind of immersed into a full life cycle of a product creation, whether that is a consulting service or it's product development. I find it much more valuable than going into the big corporations where they give you your little project or your little role on the project, and you don't get to see the full universe of what it means to get the client all the way to making the client happy with what you're providing them with. Then after the consultancy, I was working at the Turkish embassy for a while in Slovakia, which was, again, a very interesting experience. It was at the time where Turkey was still working hard on kind of advancing their accession process. So it feels like I'm really old now. And then I went to do my second master's in London, which was in public management and governance. That was one of my biggest discoveries in terms of who I want to be, when I understood through all those internships and business experience that my biggest kind of, probably one of my biggest added values is the bridging of different worlds who don't understand each other or don't speak the same language. And here I'm speaking about public policy making world and the business world, which oftentimes don't like each other, or at least don't understand each other. And so the degree that I was doing was targeted at people who wanted to be in public affairs and connecting those two worlds. And after that, during my master's, I basically did my first trip to Brussels, and I was like, yeah, this is all very cool that you want me to continue doing those internships for free, but I felt like I've had enough experience on my back to start from scratch again. And so I told to myself that I will only go back to Brussels if I pass the EPSO. And so I started job hunting around Europe. I got kind of headhunted to work for an IT company in Slovakia, which is producing e-government software. And the guy, the CEO, the owner of the company, basically told me that the fact that I don't understand technology is my biggest strength, because where the e-government projects tend to fail when we're developing technology for the technology's sake, without understanding well enough what the client actually wants. And so I was hired to, again, do that mediation between the client, the public sector, like what are actually the processes and the functions that we're trying to support with technology, mediating between that and the geeks, trying to kind of find that common language so that we're developing what we want to be developing. And this is what started building that big passion for technology in my heart. And then I was lucky enough, I passed the EPSO. I'm sure you've had enough of the EPSO conversations this week, so I'm not going to go into that torture. But yeah, I spent over 1 year of my life with that. And I moved to Brussels with that passion for technology, transformation, and skills sector. Because also when I was in the IT business, I was working a lot on pro bono projects aiming at increasing attractiveness of technical degrees, to attract more students into technical first degrees and jobs, which is what IT employers all around Europe want, right? To get good people into this sector, which is hard. And so coming back from that passion for tech and education, I got my first job in DG Enterprise, which doesn't exist anymore, in tourism unit, where I was in charge of digital and skills. That was the period when the whole Airbnb takeover of hotel industry was starting, and I was privileged to basically be put in that place of starting a conversation about what would be the reply of Europe to the whole sharing economy revolution. And so it was a very interesting place to be kind of have it. And I still get those goosebumps. I don't know if you had that during the internship, but I often have the like, who am I to be like co-deciding about where Europe is going? So there's this little voice still in my head, like, who am I? Anyway, so that was my tourism experience. Then I, after the previous elections, as the political priorities changed, I moved into procurement. So that is in Public Procurement Directorate now of DG Grow. So going from a very soft policy mainstreaming, because there's not too much of a competence that Europe has for tourism, supporting growth of tourism businesses, going into an area which is hardcore core competence, such as public procurement regulation. So that was very interesting to see how the policy tools are changing and the nature of the job has been changing. And then I was constantly involved in all kinds of bottom-up initiatives, like this beautiful fair that you're doing. There's all kinds of experiments that are happening in DGs, focusing on improving how we collaborate, how we work with talents. And that's how a couple of people in the hierarchy noticed what I was doing, and I got basically offered the job that I have now of the policy assistant to the director, which is a very, if you had a chance to deal with the policy assistants throughout your internship, you probably know that it's a lot of coordination, moving stuff around, 24/7 availability. What was special about the role that I was given is that I was asked to coordinate the Brexit process in DigiGrow, which was a beautiful experience from the policymaking perspective, but also very frustrating at the human level, especially the first year to when people were still feeling that heartbreak about the fact that it's happening, and receiving those emails from the citizens, the companies on a daily basis about the effects that it's going to have on their life, and also not understanding the effects often. It was it impacted me to the extent that I then decided to run in the European elections. So that was 2 summers ago, when I basically woke up one day and started reflecting about where is the next best place for me. And we can get back to what is the personal development work that I was talking about at the beginning of my talk, how I went through that. Now it's been a couple of years of me doing that inquiry, trying to understand how do I want to show up in the world, and what is the best myself that I can bring, and where do I feel in flow so that people feel at ease with collaborating together. And so there was this moment when I realized, after the whole Brexit trauma, and also being Slovak, you probably, some of you maybe have noticed in the charts that Slovakia always has the lowest turnout rate in European elections. So that's always been very embarrassing to be answering the questions here of my colleagues, what is Slovakia doing this time to change that? And also maybe some of you know that some years ago there was this brutal murder that happened, where a journalist and his fiancée were killed for investigation of corruption scandals that the journalist was doing. And so this has created this mood or momentum for change in Slovakia. And I thought that it's much more important for me to show up for my country and basically walk the streets of my country and talk to people about Europe and continue explaining why it's important. It's much more important than to be here and working on the next single market strategy. If ultimately, if the elections don't end up as we want, having pro-European MEPs, then whatever strategy I'm working on becomes irrelevant. And so that was a very, very interesting experience. One of the hardest things I've done in my life, because it's a brutal combination of you showing up in like very naked position in the media, on your social media, figuring out who you are, your whole branding, your own life story, learning to own your opinion, because after years of being a public servant, it's also not so obvious that you know what is your true opinion. That is not always aligned with the line to take of the commission. So it's been very interesting kind of startup experience combined with politics and communication and PR. And so now I'm in last summer. Well, given that I'm here, obviously I wasn't elected, but it was a beautiful experience. I got some 15,000 votes, and I've been building on that experience until now, coaching many, especially women. And we can get to the women empowerment story, who are considering how they can show up in their public space. And then I started my podcast, thinking about how can I continue doing that bridging again between the bubble and the general public who don't understand who the hell are the people of the Brussels bubble. So I have this podcast, Lightsoneurope, where I'm interviewing people from and around institutions about who they are, why do they stand for Europe, how their job looks like. And during COVID lockdown, the lockdown also forced me to repurpose it a little bit, and I added a YouTube channel to it. So you can, if you look me up on YouTube, you will find a couple of interviews that I've done in April, focusing, for instance, on domestic gender-based violence. And now in June, for instance, on voice coaching. So it's a combination of looking into the future of European leadership with personal development and eucareers kind of stuff. Maybe one last thing that I wanted to tell you at this occasion is, so maybe you've picked on this feature of what I've been doing, how I've been living, is that in addition to my job, I've been doing all kinds of experimentation, trying to figure out again what I think that I'm good at, how does it actually feel in practice, doing all kinds of crazy stuff, obviously always approved by the commission, but it's stretching the boundaries a little bit, and most importantly, it's stretching my own comfort zone, where I'm trying to feel into where is my best place. And so that's what I would like to invite you to consider, not only how would you like to show up, but also what are the projects that you can get yourselves into so that you can get on your own body, with your own reputation and soul and heart, experience how does it feel to be doing different kinds of jobs. And we've been discussing with Flavia, obviously, the money issue, how it's really hard to be at the place of the economic crisis that we are at. And I really, fingers crossed for all of you, especially when it comes to job hunting and having to figure out your financial situation. I really feel for how hard it is, but as long as the finances allow, I would really like to invite you to get involved with the projects that you feel could be close to the role that you think you might want to be living, not to put yourselves in that matrix or corporate red race and following somebody else's dream or expectations of your career journey without questioning it, without testing a different kind of role that you can play in the system, because otherwise you will wake up when you might be thinking that it's too late. I've spent 15, 20, 25 years building a career. You know how they say you've been climbing up the ladder and you realize the ladder's against the wrong wall. So you don't want to realize it when it's too late. Now you've got the luxury. As long as the finances and health are taken care of, feel free to keep on jumping around. And so that's the last thing that I wanted to offer you. If there's people who would like to get involved with what I'm doing, if it resonates, if you check out the podcast or the YouTube channel, if that's something that you would like to be part of, if you love doing social media, graphics, content creation, copywriting, testing different forms of communication with the European public about Europe, don't hesitate to reach out. Obviously, this is all volunteering, and we can spend as much time on this as the purse allows us. But if this is something that is close to your heart, please reach out, and we can discuss how can we concretely create something together so that you can help, for instance, with improving the quality of what I'm doing and spreading it further. So for instance, so that it reaches your region or your school or your country. Voila. So that's pretty much a bit a speedy version of what I wanted to say. And now over to you, probably Claudia. I don't know if you're going to be sharing some of the questions that the audience have been posing in the meantime.
Thank you so much, Lucia, because it's incredible. You've done so many different things, yet you remain so relatable. And I think that that's a big thing, and that's why I couldn't envisage ending this job fair with somebody else than you, because I think it's important to be close, because this is done for everybody, anybody of us, and this is something that is very key. So thank you for making it realistic.
If we speak about what's most valuable for my European Commission career, I guess that's probably what they're asking. It's my job before, when I was working in the IT business, and it's not the business analyst role. It's the role that I had of this public affairs, corporate social responsibility girl, where I was in charge of developing a campaign for better linking of education and labor market. This allowed me, basically I had this supervisionary CEO, I'm so lucky with my bosses, oh my God, where he's like, I want Slovakia to have a bigger conversation about schools not delivering the kind of graduates that the labor market needs. Here's your budget, I'm gonna mentor you every Friday afternoon, and you create something out of it. And so basically for a couple of years, I became the girl on the news who was the voice of the IT sector in Slovakia, talking about the quality of the education. And why it was most impactful is that it gave me that freedom that was supported by the structure of the company and these very smart people around me to test who I want to be, what are the roles that's what I was talking about, which are the roles that I feel comfortable in. Is it the frontline comms? Is it the backend analytical work? Is it whole day in the office? Is it whole day in the streets or in the media? It's different contexts and the way of living your everyday life, which is going to show you what is it that you feel most comfortable in. Because bureaucracy, I mean, let's not kid ourselves, is a certain lifestyle that we have to accept as something that is feeding our souls. And if it's not, then there's going to be some compromising that we will have to do around it. Now, my personal view is that I think it's important that we start humanizing the communication a bit more, that we move away from communicating the what we do, all these amazing policy proposals, and we go more into who are the people producing it. That was the main takeaway I had from the campaign. When people were like, we get you that you're an expert, it's like, it's on my forehead that I get you. They were never asking me about what was my vision for migration crisis or future of Eurozone or whatever. They wanted to know who I am, why do I care, why have I decided to trade my cool startup lifestyle for being in the bureaucracy in Belgium. And once they got my passion, then that's when they were willing to go to those elections, because they were like, okay, so now I know who is Brussels, because I've never seen a real Brussels person in my life. And so I think if sky was the limit, what I would do is I would empower the staff, to the policy people, the employees, to travel more, go not to back to school preaching to the convinced, not do the policy, what's it called, the citizens dialogues at the perm reps, or I mean, all of this is great, and I've been part of these programs as well. It's important that we go where nobody goes, that we go outside of the capitals, that we go to the regions, that we go among the super disadvantaged communities. And it's hard. And obviously we have to give you the trainings, but also you have to trust the people, that even if we make mistakes in how we're communicating the LTTs, because obviously I don't know everything about, all kinds of packages that are being adopted, it doesn't matter. The people need to feel for who is Europe and why the heart should be with EU. Otherwise, we'll have more exits. So that's my view.
I think as a woman in this leadership position, what kind of hard tips and what kind of insights would you give to us women, and is the gender perspective important in the connection with leadership?
It is so important. It is one of my biggest passions, the stand for advancing feminine leadership and showing how the two sides of the coin, the feminine and masculine, that all of us have in ourselves. How do we need to be able to tap into each of them depending on the situation that we're in? and the communication that we find ourselves in. So I think it's super important. That's why I'm such a I'm a big coaching junkie, involved in all kinds of women empowerment networks globally. I founded a couple of women networks here in Brussels, and I think it's extremely important that we give the tools to young women and men to understand this inner masculine and feminine power that they have in themselves. It's again big part of the inner work that we need to be doing, so that we feel aligned in how we communicate, what we communicate, and how we use the energies that we have in ourselves. Because then if it's kind of messy inside, it shows in the communication that we're doing with other people, in the collaborations that we have, in the quality of the work that we're producing. And so that's where the link with the leadership comes in, where I feel it's not a numbers game, like all these 50, what is it now? I don't know, 40% target of women in hierarchy in the commission. And obviously we're gonna increase that, and we're now working on the Asia strategy to advance women in the hierarchies. It's very important, but it's not a full story. The story is what is the quality of the leadership that comes with diversity. And obviously it's not just gender, but we're discussing gender now. Is the quality of the listening, the communication, the collaboration that we bring to the table, which then is in the design of the policy that we are creating. And so I think my guess is that if products are, it's like any rules in the society. If it's produced by men for men, it's not serving the whole society, because the DNA of what we're producing has not been equally produced, if it makes sense. So yeah, it's very close to my heart. And if that's something that interests you, you can go to the podcast. I've done some very interesting interviews with women who are leading the debate in Brussels. So I don't know if you will be doing any follow-up, but happy to share some links as well, or reach out on Instagram or wherever.
Thank you so much, Lucia. Really, it's incredible. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who thinks that. In the comment box, I've seen a lot of people who say that like it resonates between them and personally, because yeah, you're very relatable, and it's important to have somebody to look up to and to see what kind of steps they've done to reach the professional goals and build a career, and personally but professionally as well. Andre,
also, maybe I should have added, so that, because you're like so sweet and like but don't you guys think that there's a lot, there's been a lot of chaos and not knowing in my path as well. I'm not saying that I have it all figured out, and I have also no clue where I'm gonna be in 5 years, as probably as many of you don't. So there's a lot of struggle along the way, but it's important to be able to distinguish that and be with it and play with it and enjoy, like knowing that when you're in the mud, you enjoy being in the mud and you're removing the layers, and eventually something's gonna show up as you're new. So I don't want to come out of this as the superwoman. I'm just sharing parts of my wisdom, but don't you think that I've got it all figured out?
But thank you so much. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that if we have further questions, we can contact you, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Just go to my website. You will find luciaklestincova.eu, and you'll find there all the buttons for my social media. So just use whatever you are binging on most of your time and reach out. I'll be happy to continue the conversation.